Hello, ladybugs. How's everybody doing tonight, this evening? It was really warm here today, so it was just a really warm day. I'm starting by dressing Tegan because I needed the dress that she was wearing for the video. So here's what she's wearing now. Isn't this adorable? Say hi, ladybugs. So anyway, we're going to finish dressing Tegan. She's the Adele by Ping Lao. I'm having a little bit of a down day, so it's always good to come down and play with the babies. Just having some family issues and feeling a little bit down about myself. And there's Tegan. Doesn't she look cute? I'll have to take pictures later of her because she does. She looks adorable. She just needs some red bows. Let me sit her up for a minute so I can look for the bows. Actually, I'll find her bows later. Let me just put her right here. So there's Tegan. She's all dressed. And today we're going to dress the Quints. They are Hayden, Aniston, Aspen, Solea, and Berkeley. So we're going to dress those girls. And these dresses are for another set of twins. But this is what we're going to dress the Quints in. We have two matching green dresses with bloomers with the little octopus. The one has, no, they both have seahorses. Sorry, I thought one was octopus. And then we have these two twin little bubble rompers. And then this yellow dress is going to be the fifth outfit because I don't have any outfits for 5 of them. But it's okay because we can make it work. So we're going to start with Miss Aniston. Here she is. Okay. Here's beautiful Miss Aniston. I really want to add some lip color and blush to her, to all of the Quints, because they're all a little bit pale for my taste. I mean, they're beautiful babies, don't get me wrong, but I think they're a little bit pale, so I would love to add some color to the Quints. And I think I'll be able to do that once I get my painting area set up so that it's, you know, I can do that. So this is Aniston. We're starting with her, and she is the Ella May kit, excuse me. You know, it's hard when your kids grow up because, you know, you still want to be mom, but they don't really want you to. So it's tough. You know, it's tough switching from the mother-child relationship to the adult-friend relationship. You know what I mean? It's tough on us and it's tough on them. So that, you know, that's a stressful time for anybody. My youngest is just turned 20 a couple days ago. And my older one is, I have 2 stepchildren as well. And 2 adopted boys. But my biological children are just the 2 girls. And, you know, that's a hard time. Going from the, you know, parent-child relationship to the friend relationship. It just is hard. I think it's hard on everybody. It's hard on the kids. It's hard on the moms. You know, they're trying to find their way in the world by themselves without having to rely on mom and dad, if there's a dad in the picture. And so they're trying to find their independence, and that's tough. And then at the same time, you're trying to let go. You know, you're trying to say, okay, you're an adult now. You need to, you know, live your life and have the consequences of your decisions, both positive and negative. But that's a tough, you know, it's a tough thing to do. It's a tough thing for parents to have to, you know, let go in that way. It's just hard. It's hard for everybody. It's a hard transition. And sometimes it goes smoothly and sometimes it doesn't. And with one of my daughters, it's going very smoothly. And with my other daughter, it's not going so smoothly. But that's life. So I'm just a little bummed today. So it's always nice to come down and play with the babies, huh? This is my relaxation space. It's, you know, I come down here, I dress them, I do their hair, and I just really enjoy my time. And it seems like whatever's bothering me just melts away. You know, I'm a pretty upbeat person. Not a lot bothers me, but when it comes to my family, it does bother me, you know. It's hard. It's hard to, you know, have issues with your family and not know what to do about it, you know. So I'm kind of struggling with my younger daughter and feel like I'm doing everything wrong, which I think a lot of parents feel that way. Oh, you know, in a few minutes I need to go up after I do this video and refill the bottles because they're running on empty. Yeah. I just need to pick up some hair stuff that I can bring downstairs and keep in the bathroom down here so that I don't have to go upstairs to refill them. But I need to do that. Anywho, do you guys ever feel like that transition with your kids is a tough one? You know, that for those of you that have gone through it, I know not everybody has adult children, but it's really tough sometimes when you have to go from, you know, the controlling sort of parent-child relationship that you have when they're children to the more friend relationship that you have when they're adults. You know, it doesn't feel right because, you know, you've been mom for so long. And then, you know, they're at a stage where they're really trying to exert their independence because, you know, they know that they have to be accountable for their actions. And so they're trying to exert that independence and find their own way in the world. And you're trying desperately to hang on, you know, because, you know, nobody wants to give up that relationship with their children, you know. But it has to happen, you know. For those of you that aren't there yet, all I can say is it's not an enviable position to be in. I think it gets easier as they get older and they're not so new to the adult world. I think as parents, we worry a little bit less once they've established themselves. But when they're in that interim stage, sort of between 18 and like 22, they're really in an in between stage. You know, they have the rights and the decision-making power of adults, but you know, in their minds, they're still, you know, nothing changes the day before your 18th birthday to the day after. You know what I mean? In that 2-day span, nothing massive happens to the brain. It's not like they instantly grow up and mature. You know, there's that in-between period that's a tough period for everybody involved. They're trying, you know, I mean, that's really the only, if you think about it, that's really the only place in your life where you have to make many irreversible decisions. You know, you have to decide whether you're going to go to college. You have to decide what field you're going to go into. I mean, that is a very stressful time for them, and it's an incredibly stressful time for us because we know how stressful it is for them, and we know everything that's riding on those decisions. And we want to be there to help them make the best decisions. But at that point, because they're just gaining their independence and they want to try it out, you know, they want to try their footing out and see how things are going to go. They don't really want our help at that stage. And that's when they need it the most, more than any other time of their lives. That's when they need your help because nothing massive happens from 17 and 363 days to 18 years old, you know. They're still the same people they were 24 hours ago, but now they have all this decision-making power and all this responsibility on them. It's a difficult time for the parents. It's a difficult time for the children. So if you're not there yet, I envy you, but you will be someday. And when you are, you'll realize how unenviable a position it is. It's just not a good place to be. Like I said, I understand that the kids are wanting to assert themselves because, you know, they're just newly adults and they want those rights and that power. And at the same time, you and I both know that they're just kids, you know, they're just children. There's nothing massively different about them than what they were like yesterday. So it's really a tough place to be. For those of you with grown children, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And they don't want your help at that age. In fact, it's the only time in their life that they really will be adamant that they don't want your help because, you know, it's like when we try anything new, you know, and anytime you try something new, you know, you want to do it. You want to do it yourself. You want to show that you're competent. You want to show that you can do it. And we know that it's not that simple because we've been there. But they don't want to hear that, you know. They don't want to hear that you've been there and you might know something more than what they know, you know. They just don't want to hear that. And I was there. I remember that stage of my life. It's an incredibly stressful and hectic time. It's very chaotic, you know. They have a lot of decisions to make in a very short period of time. And they're kind of bound to those decisions, you know, when you go to college or you choose not to go to college, you know. those are decisions that are very, very hard to reverse because, you know, you can decide not to go to college, but as we all know, once you have to pay real bills, rent and electricity and food, and, you know, once you don't have a guaranteed place to live, that's a that's a tough place to be, and then trying to go to college on top of it. I mean, it's possible, but it's much more difficult than, say, if you're living with mom and dad. Like, we had a rule in our house that when they got out of high school, they could live with us as long as they were going to college and working part-time. We wouldn't charge them rent. They could live with us until they finished college. But none of our kids took us up on that offer. They all wanted to move out when they turned 18 and go live their lives, and I understand that, but they don't realize by not going to college what they're doing to their lives, you know. Although some people say college is a waste, and I guess it depends on what you go to college for. It can be a waste, but it's just a tough place to be. It's a tough place for mom. It's a tough place for kiddo, and there really isn't any good way to figure this out. You know what I mean? It's like you still want to protect them. They're still your babies. You still want to hold them close, but they are running from you as fast as they can, you know. Thankfully, my other daughter is a special needs kid, and she's not gone through that because mentally she's like 8 or 9 years old. And so she still very much needs and wants my help. But my other daughter, you know, and even my stepdaughter, you know, they get to that age and they don't want to live with you anymore. You know, they want to move out on their own. They want that independence and that freedom. And I totally understand that. But at the same time, we know how much is riding on these decisions and what they're going to do with their lives. And I just don't think they can appreciate that. You know, they don't have the mindset to be able yet, because their brains aren't fully developed until 25. You know, they don't really have the mindset to understand all of the ramifications of the small decisions that they make. And it's just a trying time. As parents, you know, we desperately want the best for our kids, and sometimes you can't make them make the right decisions, you know, and that's very stressful. So it's stressful, but at the end of the day, you know, everything goes on. And what do you guys think of Aniston? She look pretty? She looks very pretty. I love this outfit on her. And look at the bows dangling. I combined hanging and dangling. Hangling, invented a new word. Hanging down the back. Isn't that pretty? Looks so pretty. All right, there's little Miss Aniston. She's the first of the Quints to get dressed. All right, we'll set her over here for a minute. And then we'll get Hayden. We'll put Hayden in the matching dress to Aniston. Actually, you know what? We'll put Berkeley in the matching dress to Aniston. Because the other two look so much alike, they could be identical twins. Here's Miss Berkeley, and she's the Leontine. I forget who sculpted the Leontine, but she's the Leontine. So yeah, so that's what I'm dealing with, you know, in that in-between stage where things are just a little bit sticky and, you know, stressful. And you know, they stop wanting your help about 13, and they don't really want your help again until about 34, when they're smart enough to know that they need advice. At this age, you know, 18, 19, 20, even 16 and 17, they don't think they need anything from anybody. They're invincible, they're unstoppable, you know, their lives are, you know how they are. And even in today's world, it's even harder, you know. I can see that it's much harder in today's world than it was when I was that age, you know. There's so much stacked against them. And it's just a tough place to be. It's not easy. Especially if you have a special needs child. Now, thankfully, we have a program in our town called WISE, and it is basically an extended high school program. So special needs kids can go to this extended high school program, and they not only continue their education, but the people at WISE are very knowledgeable in transitioning from youth services to adult services. So that was something I was very concerned about, but WISE made it much easier. And Caitlin did 3 years of WISE. This was her last year. And I couldn't say enough good things about it. It's a wonderful program. I hope that you guys have something like it in your town if you have a special needs child. It is really just a wonderful, wonderful thing, because going from child services to adult services is very tricky. It's very difficult. It's not an easy transition. And having a program like that where they basically can walk you through going, switching over from the child services to the adult services is amazing. I just cannot say how grateful I am of that program, and the things that it did for me and for my daughter. It made that transition so much easier, and I just loved it. It was great. Now that she's done with Wise, she's almost 22, and now we've got all the adult services established. So there's very little as far as bureaucracy and red tape that we have to do now that she's done with that program. So that's been a godsend, really. It's been amazing. So yeah, that's what I'm dealing with. Just going through some stuff with my children as they grow up and become young adults and individual people. It's tough for them too, though. I don't think it's only tough on us. I mean, as I said before, there's nothing magical or major that happens on your 18th birthday. You're still the same person you were at 17, but you have a lot more on your plate. And so I do believe it's just as tough for them as it is on the parents. We all hope that we'll go from that parent-child relationship to the friend relationship smoothly, but it just doesn't happen that way for everybody. Certainly hasn't happened that way for me and my daughter. I love her with all my heart. And there's, nothing I wouldn't do for her, but you have to draw the line at some point. You have to draw the line when things become toxic for both parties. It's not just her, it's me as well. My daughter and I have been oil and water for a lot of years. So, I think it falls on both of us to be a little more tolerant, a little more understanding of the other person. But that's hard, I do my best, and sometimes I succeed and sometimes I fail. And if I fail, I just pick myself up and brush myself off and do it again. I mean, really, what else can you do, right? For those of you that have children crossing into adulthood, put in the comments how you deal with that transition, and that, letting them you kind of have to let go all at once. How did you deal with that if you have grown children? How did you transition smoothly from parent-child to friend, or parent-adult-child, because I've never believed in parents being friends when they're raising children, when they're raising their young children. You really need to be the authoritarian and guide them and protect them and get them ready for the world. But once you get to this stage, that's just not a feasible possibility anymore. You know what I mean? So it's just a tough place to be, and it's stressful, and it fills me with anxiety, as I think it does most parents. We know what's riding on these next couple of years, and I don't think the kids really appreciate the severity of what that is that's riding on it. They think it's just another day, and we know that that's not the case. If they choose not to go to college, it gets so much harder to go later. So, I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about or what I'm going through right now. So I'm just curious how you guys deal with that. And the babies are always such a big help when I'm feeling stressed or feeling depressed or whatever. I'm not really depressed right now. I'm feeling a little anxious and stressed, but not depressed or anything like that. I'm going to do all their hair the same way because I want to take a group shot of the 5 of them once they're dressed. Do you guys have twins or triplets or, any babies that look similar enough to be multiples? Do you like to dress them exactly the same? Do you like to dress them similar, or do you like to dress them completely different? My thing is that I generally, although in this case this is an exception, I generally don't put them in identical outfits. I generally put them in similar outfits. Like, for instance, if this dress was green, then I might put the other one in a yellow dress that had the same pattern, but not necessarily, you know what I mean? Identical. I'm not all that fond of dressing them identically, but I like to dress them similarly. And yeah. All right, there is Berkeley. Isn't she pretty? She's another one I want to add some color to. I feel like she's just too pale, like her feet and her hands, and I'd like to add some color to her. I am a painter too. I do make reborns, so I could easily paint her if I wanted to. And I think I will as soon as I get my painting area up and running, and organized and set up. I would love to be able to paint some of the toddlers that are a little bit more on the pale side. Although they're beautiful, I tend to like some blushing and some color. I did Aniston's hair, Hayden's hair. I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, but it came out really pretty. So Hayden and Aspen are going to wear the yellow bubble rompers, and then Solea, who is the 5th quint, will wear this yellow dress, because I don't have another outfit that matches, but it's similar. It's similar coloring, and it's really pretty, and it kind of goes with the aesthetic that I'm going for. So it will work. I'll do Hayden's hair after I get her dressed. Hi, Hayden. Whoop, where are you going with your legs there, girly? And these are the twin bubble rompers that I'm going to put on the other two of them. That would be Hayden and Aspen. And I've decided to put, the reason I decided to match them the way that I did is because Hayden and Aspen are the two that look the most alike. They almost look like the same kit. Even though Hayden is Louisa and Aspen is Lily Beth, they look so similar in the kit that I wanted them to wear one of the outfits that were matching. And Solea kind of looks a little bit different. It almost looks like I have quintuplets, but 2 of them are identical twins, and then the other 3 are fraternal. You know what I mean? I actually like having twins and triplets. I think it's fun. It's fun to have ones that you can say are multiples. My best guess, somebody asked me the other day, how old do I feel like these babies are? And I feel like the 28-inch babies are somewhere between 14 and like 18 months. That's what I feel like. I feel like that's about the size that they are, that they're the 14 to 18 month range. So that's the best estimate I could give for their age range. What do you guys think for the 28-inch toddlers like this size? Based on the sculpt of the face, what do you think their age is? I think that 14 to 18 months is I would say right around 18 months. I don't think they're quite 2 yet. I think they look a little too young to be 2. But 14 to 18 months is a pretty good estimate. I'd probably go right in the center and say that they're about 16 months. What do you guys think? When you look at the 28-inch toddlers like this one and the other 2 that I've already put dressed, what do you think about their age, like their chronological age? How old would you put them? I'd be interested to hear your answer, because I've heard some people say they could be 2 to 2.5. I've heard other people say, what I've said, around 16 months. Yeah, so I guess it just depends on how you see them. But I think based on the facial features and the size, the chubbiness of the hands and the feet, I would say that they're still in the waddler range, Waddlers are typically 1 to 2, 1 to 2, yeah. So they're babies up until a year old, and then they become waddlers at 1, I think until 18 months, technically, and then they become toddlers after they hit the waddler phase. So like 1 to 1.5 is the waddler phase. So that's where I put them. I put them right at the 1.5 mark, maybe a little bit younger, 16, 15 months, somewhere in there. Kind of like the same size as the Liam, although I kind of get the impression from looking at Liam's face that Liam is slightly older than like these babies, Liam just looks a little more mature. So I would say Liam is closer to 2. Although the size is the same, the maturity in the face is a little bit more recognizable in the Liam than it is with these guys, you know. These guys still have a very babyish, chubby face, so I don't know. What do you guys think? I still am waiting for responses in the comments about what your favorite size baby is. You know, what are your dream kits? Those kinds of questions. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really does help the channel, and I would be incredibly grateful. Yeah, she had a lot of ponytail holders in her hair. So I think I've already counted. I don't know how many are there, but I think there was one there from the last baby, and then the rest of them came out of her hair. She had quite a few braids and stuff. So there we go. Okay, now we've got it. Oops, we forgot to do this one braid here. There we go. It was a nice hot day here today. I want to say it got up to around 92. It was a really nice day. We haven't had days that hot. Oh, when I go upstairs, I have to bring the turtle in. I forgot to do that. All right, guys, I'll do a second video. I actually have to go get the turtle because it's gotten later and it's getting dark out. So I'll do a second video here in a few minutes, okay? Be right back.